Whether you're consuming this content live, later as a webinar, or in the Seeding Social Good podcast, we are glad you're here. I'm Katrina VanHuss, founder of Turnkey For Good, and with me today is Steve Merker, one of our favorite Canadians. Steve is VP Corporate and Community Partnerships at the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation, and he is responsible for engaging literally thousands of volunteer supporters through Canada's most successful and diverse set of events. Turnkey recently completed a review of your event series, and I wondered if you could just take a moment, Steve, and tell us both how great you are and introduce yourself formally, and then tell us how great we are too. Go ahead.
Well, how great I am. I think the only person in the world, or the only, would probably be my dog at home who loves me every time I take her for a walk twice a day. There's no one else in the world that will tell me that. But yeah, so we worked with your team, Katrina, earlier this year, and we did an extensive review of our fundraising portfolio, and like focusing on our peer-to-peer portfolio, which is pretty extensive, but also beyond that, right? Because one of the things we wanted to learn was how they all interplayed with each other. And because we have such a diverse fundraising portfolio, there's so many moving parts, and it's not just about our events, but how do our events integrate with our major gifts and with our lottery program that we run and with our other annual giving. There's so many things going on, and it was great to have your team's expertise look at the whole picture and then advise us on the whole picture, but also specifically at it as it related to our peer-to-peer portfolio. So yeah, we had some great learnings, some stuff that reinforced what we already knew, but also some great new insights that's going to help with our 5-year strat plan that we're working on right now.
And your team reinforced for us a belief that we already hold, which is Canadians are just the nicest people. Oh my God, you guys are just the best. I love it. So what inspired this conversation? On my side of the fence, we at Turnkey believe that the fastest and the most powerful way to impact someone's identity is to embed them in a community of believers in which they can have one-on-one constituent conversations. So we come at it from a psychologist's point of view, and we encourage our clients to build situations that provide that embedment of the embedment opportunity for constituents. And the outcome of that is increased lifetime value. It is a long game. Steve comes at it from a different angle, but lands in the same place. His is a viewpoint informed by data and experience, and that's what we're exploring today. Our hope is to give you hope. So often events and series are evaluated by annual revenue only, and that simply does not tell the full story. In fact, because Steve has great data, we think it only tells about 60% of the story. So let's get into it. We're going to load you folks for bear at your next budget meeting. So Steve, let's talk about your portfolio and tell me, in regard to it, now, number one, how big is it? It's pretty big. And number two, how are you evaluated?
Well, that's a moving target, how I'm evaluated. But, we have a pretty extensive fundraising portfolio here at the Princess Margaret. So for my American friends south of the border, the Princess Margaret Cancer Center is one of the top 5 cancer research centers in the world. We're for sure the leading cancer research institute in the country here in Canada. And our mission, we exist to raise money. That's the bottom line. We need to raise money to empower the scientists to make discoveries to help cure cancer, not just for people here in Toronto, but for people, across the country and around the world. And so my specific role relates to the events. Even though we have a lottery program, we have our major gifts program, our entire portfolio ladders up to about $280 million of gross revenue per year. And our event portfolio is 30 to 35 million of that. But we're going to dig into that a little bit. But on this slide here is the yes, but slide. And I wanted to put this up here. So I just went and Google images, and this is what I came up with. How do you measure the success of your event? And these are all the traditional ways that people look at evaluating their event. So did people have a good time? Oh, great, 91.4%. Did we have any health and safety incidents? These are all important things. The quality of the catering. People are always complaining about the food. You can never make everyone happy. But, these are important things, but these are the secondary things that you need to be worrying about as it relates to your fundraising event. It's always, to me, it's about when you sign up to do one of our peer-to-peer events, you're signing up to fundraise first, and there happens to be an event attached to it second. And then when we dig into what follows from there is what I'm really excited about. And that's what I know we're going to get into today. So this
All
is
right.
this slide here. Yeah. Like, these are important, but let's really get into it.
All right, let's go. So these are all your properties. Tell us about them, and tell us how you at the foundation view them.
So so we have our Ride to Conquer Cancer event, which people are familiar with, Pan Mass Challenge and Pelotonia. So like any good Canadian, I did my R&D when we were researching this bike ride, and I went down and did the Pan Mass Challenge. And in my mind, R&D stands for rip off and duplicate. So we Canadianized the Pan Mass Challenge and created the Ride to Conquer Cancer, which has been going for 16 years now. And last year we crested $280 million raised in the lifetime of that event. We also have our Walk to Conquer Cancer event, which is now 21 years old, $193 million raised in that event. Of course, we're good Canadians, so we have to have a hockey event. So Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer. We have our Journey to Conquer Cancer. That is our community-focused walk, run. Northern Pass is another bike ride we do up in Northern Ontario. We have a DIY program and a Quest, with like a streaming program. So all these peer-to-peer fundraising events ladder up to about $32 to $33 million this year. And Katrina, you're probably wondering that picture of the house on the other side of the slide. And that is not my house. That's not my cottage. It's not my vacation home. That is just a lovely picture. I think it might be your place, Katrina.
I wish.
You wish. But the reason why I wanted to include this picture is because it has a beautiful front porch. And look at all these people gathering around the front porch, right? So our events serve as the front porch to the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation. We're very social people up here in Canada. And all of our events, I feel, create that sense of community that you talked about earlier. And we have our front porch open, and the events that we run serve as that entry point, as that front porch, as that welcoming committee to what we have to do, which is conquer cancer in our lifetime. So that's what this slide's all about.
All right. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast, we will have a link to all the slides in the show notes, but we'll also describe them so that if, like me, you don't want to take off your gardening gloves and go look right now, we'll just describe it for you. So Steve, with all these different properties, they all have different designs. But would you say that the trends that you've seen and what you're going to share with us today extrapolates across all those properties, regardless of design?
Absolutely. And,
Okay.
we were talking earlier, Katrina, off air. And, in the early days of launching some of these events, we were like, oh man, adding another event, is that going to compete with our existing events? Like, we have 2 bike rides, we have 2 walks, we have all these different things. And, but absolutely not. They complement each other. And it's interesting, and we'll get into the data on how people actually migrate, from program to program, or from room to room in the house once they come in the front porch.
I love it. So you're really saying, like, every new event is like another entry point into the mission, another door people can come through.
Yeah, and exactly. We have like our bike rides and our walks, which, if you look at the top 30 peer-to-peer fundraising events, there's always going to be bike rides and walks. But, we looked at a gap in the marketplace 11 years ago, and we said, hey, we got to do a hockey event. So we created Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer. And then in this day and age, with everybody online and streaming and gaming, we created Quest to Conquer Cancer to speak to that community, right? So there's so many different communities out there, and we need to meet them in their comfort zone. Right. And with demographics changing, we need to find ways to connect with people in their specific communities.
For years, I've heard people call events the front door of an organization, and I always believed it. But what was missing was what you're going to show us right now. So let's take a look. And I hope folks can see this. What you're looking at are rider migration patterns. And some of these numbers are small. So Steve, if you could be pretty detailed in your description.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad that this slide turned out. So I hope people can see the actual migration lines from program to program. So what I did was I took out our lottery supporters, because we have like millions of people who buy lottery tickets. Our lottery, by the way, the ticket price is $100 per ticket. So it's not, it's a higher barrier to entry for our lottery, but we have we sell almost 1 million tickets, over 1 million tickets a year. So I took all those people out. So these are people who have supported Princess Margaret through some kind of donation, or they joined an event. So and this is, I think, going back 10 to 15 years, maybe a little bit longer. So almost 1.3 million supporters in our database. And of those 1.3 million, their first interaction was, and I highlighted the peer-to-peer Ride to Conquer Cancer. So those are people who joined as a participant in the Ride to Conquer Cancer. So the first introduction to our foundation was through the Ride to Conquer Cancer. And you can see how, 37,000 joined road hockey and so on and so forth. And then from there, their next interaction after participating in the ride was donating to the ride. 1,200 of them donated to our walk. 1,000 of them re-participated in the ride as their next interaction. Some gave to community events, some gave to road hockey or participated. But interesting, if you can't scroll down here, but 4 people from this group became major gift donors. So they started out as a ride participant, and then they migrated through our various programs, and some of them became major gift donors, which we thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is. Okay. And then, so this is looking at rider migration patterns, meaning what did they do once they initially participated in your event, and you're showing them distributing into a lot of other ways, but in particular, into the walk, or from the walk into the ride, right?
Or no, peer-to-peer. So they started as a rider. Their next interaction, they actually donated to a rider, or some of them donated to a walker, or they rejoined the ride.
Got it.
So this is just their next interaction, but they could have had multiple interactions if you keep following like this migration pattern. The supporter journey keeps going. We would need like I don't know, 10 pieces of paper taped together to fully illustrate it.
And that might be worth doing sometime. I think that'd be fun. Okay, so this next slide, if you could describe what is happening here.
Right. So the previous slide was participants. So they first joined as a rider in our Ride to Conquer Cancer. So this slide here is donors. So we took that same 1.3 million people, and 235,000 of them were donors to the Ride to Conquer Cancer first. So you can see how that dominates almost everything else. So some people started out as an annual donor, 75,000. Some people started in our community events, 48,000. But you can see 235,000 donors started their first interaction. So that's the front porch, was the Ride to Conquer Cancer. And then from there, 177,000 of them, their next interaction after donating to the ride was donating to the ride again. 25,000 of those people donated to our walk program. And if you keep going down, 6,000 people donated to our journey program. 4,000 people donated to as a memorial or tribute gift. And what you don't see, if you kept scrolling down, 98 of them did a major gift eventually. So of those 235,800 donors to riders, eventually 98 of them gave a major gift as a next interaction, which is pretty substantial.
That is. So I know you've been on a personal journey over the last 3 or 4 years, wrapping your head around all this stuff. Prior to having this kind of information, how did your department, how did the revenue department at large budget effectively? I mean, if this was not a known factor, this kind of migration, including into major gifts, how did it happen?
Well, I'm not going to lie. We had the tallest silos, and everyone, I'm sure, talks about silos. When I attended the Turnkey convening event a couple of months ago, there was a big theme of silos everywhere. And when I joined the foundation, we had those big, tall silos. And my first event that I was involved with was the Ride to Conquer Cancer. And people were saying, Steve, I want to tap your donors. I want to tap your riders. And I was like, no, they're mine. They're mine. I'm hoarding them all. Nobody can have my riders and my donors. And but then over time, we started to delve into the data a little bit, and we understood that we were losing them And some of them migrated just by happenstance to other programs.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
which made us actually want to get into the numbers a little bit more. And so we about 7 or 8 years ago, we had this guy join, very thoughtful, he joined the foundation and really great with data. And he started to really dig into it. And he showed us that our events can serve as a catcher feeder system. So they might join the Ride to Conquer Cancer. Some of them might join as a donor to a rider, and then they become a rider themselves. Or a rider, after doing the Ride to Conquer Cancer for 5 years, they're like, nah, I'm kind of tired of that. I want to move on. And instead of them going to another charity, well, guess what? We have another slate of opportunities to support the foundation, and cancer touches more people than any other disease in our country. So they want to double down and participate in other programs, whether that's buy a lottery ticket or do another one of our bike rides, or maybe they don't want to ride over 200 kilometers over 2 days, and they want to do a 5-kilometer walk through the streets of Toronto. So we have so many opportunities for them. And so we really started to understand that people wanted to migrate to different programs. So how do we facilitate that in an appropriate way? Those are the questions we started to ask ourselves going forward.
I ask you questions because I want to know them, not necessarily because the slots are in this order, but you also found that event supporters at large are simply more valuable. Is that true?
So true. And so do the math here. We looked at, and so not including major gift donors. So someone who buys a lottery ticket for $100, or someone who does a tribute gift in honor of somebody, or an annual, donor who commits to $50 a month for a year or 2 years or whatever. So we did the math on all those supporters, and an event supporter had 4 times the lifetime value versus all other supporters that came in to the front porch of the foundation. So that was like, wow, that's powerful. That's powerful stuff. And going back to that first slide that we showed on how you evaluate an event, like, you don't ever show the 4x lifetime value in a slide like that, right? When the VP of finance or your CEO is saying, Steve, your P&L, like profit, loss, or gross revenue, net revenue, you got to do better. I'm like, well, hold on a second. I know that rider that we recruited, he's going to come back, or she's going to come back 4 times or whatever, right? So 4x lifetime value is a pretty incredible stat.
So you went on a personal journey from 4 years ago to now, where I think you had shared with me that you were playing with your elbows out a little bit about your list, and everybody else was too. And you have completed a transition, it sounds like, to, would you also include, for example, mission activities in this crossover benefit, increasing lifetime value, or have you guys studied that?
Actually, so let me just to clarify. So, like, understanding what the motivations are for these people who cross over. Well, I know, I don't have the data exactly, but I know that our leaderboards for all of our events are rife with people who've been touched personally by cancer, whether them are a survivor, or maybe someone in their family or their office have been touched by cancer. We know that mission drives people to be more engaged, and it also drives them to community, right? Which, you talked about at the outset, is that we have this incredible community. It's, our events are the physical manifestation of our brand. And it brings people together to share stories and to cry on each other's shoulders and to celebrate. And so undoubtedly, the lifetime value of our event supporters is linked back to mission. I don't have the exact data, but my gut backs that up.
Oh, I would completely agree with you. So we know that crossover from one event to another event definitely has what looks like a causal effect on lifetime value. Would you think that moving into, for example, advocacy, acting on legislative priorities, would it have that same effect in your mind, or no?
No, that's a good question. I would, I bet you there's a bunch of people who would, I think there are. I mean, here's something I can give you an example. In Canada, we just lowered the breast cancer screening age from 50 to 40, right? Because a lot of women were out there saying, hey, we need to get our mammograms earlier. We need to get things done. And so, and those people have usually gone through, treatment, or they've gone through cancer. And so they're like the biggest advocates. So I bet you some of the people who are supporting us and doing our events are also out there advocating, for cancer and for screening and for early detection.
Right. And, from the psychological perspective, I think any activity that puts people together, and often these legislative activities put people together to go do a task, to lobby somebody at their office, I am sure that has the same effect. So, all right, so let's move on, because you have even more data that these folks on the call can swing like a bat at their boss. So this is, explain the slide. It just blew me away.
Yeah. So here's where we really started to understand the supporter journey and the value that it brought back to our foundation. So we found out that if someone supports 2 different programs at the foundation, that their lifetime value goes up by a multiple of 3. If they support 3 or participate in 3 different programs, so that could be they did an event, they bought lottery ticket package, and they became an annual donor, their lifetime value went up 7x. And if they did 4 different programs, 14x what the lifetime value is of someone who just supported 1 program. So holy bananas. Like, isn't that wild to think that if you can inspire people to support you in a couple of different ways, their lifetime value goes up in multiples. And so we've really started to understand that. And we're really trying to figure out the best and most appropriate ways to ensure that people in our family, in our community, understand that there's different ways they can support. And that might be, like I said, maybe they're tired with 1 program and they want to move on, or looking for something new, or they just want to double down on their support and be a part of our community. So this was enlightening when we saw this data. And so we're really being thoughtful in how we maximize the opportunity and present those opportunities to the people that want to support.
So this data was over, I think you said, a 10-year span. So, for example, people would participate in at least 4 activities over a 10-year span. So they're moving. There will be someone out there who thinks this is simply correlated. What's your belief? Correlated or causal?
Probably a little bit of both at this point. However, what we are doing, and we've done some testing, so in the past few years, we've done some work with our 2 bike rides, for example, to make sure, like 6-7 years ago, we were like, keep the bike rides separate. We don't want, one person to migrate over here, and maybe people are trading down on a lower minimum fundraising program. But then we realized people are looking for different experiences, or man, what if we lost them on that program and they go to another charity supporting something else? Like, let's keep them in our family. So we started to do some purposeful marketing, or I don't know, I wouldn't call it marketing, but inspiration, communication to show them that we have so many other ways that you can support. And so we saw the math, like, holy cow, how people wanted to support us. And they're like, man, I've been looking for something else to do to support you guys, and now you have it. So we're doing more and more of this purposeful communications to people to show them how they can support us. And we're lucky. I mean, as we're a pretty big foundation, as I said before, we've got, our lottery programs and all these different events and major gifts, you name it. And because we have such a diversified portfolio, people have the opportunity to migrate. I know there's probably some organizations out there listening, the other 4 people that are listening to us, Katrina, beside our friends, they're probably, some are big organizations who have many opportunities to migrate over. But if you're in a small organization, there's probably those opportunities as well that you just haven't really figured it out, or maybe you haven't wanted to take that risk, but you really got to look into it and maybe go and interview your supporters if you don't have a budget to do the analytics that we do. But these opportunities are out there.
So, couple of things. I think the data is heavily skewed in that you guys are able to drop these silos and work across because you're Canadian and you're just nicer people. I don't know if Americans can do this. I'm just not sure. But let's assume that we can. Or let's assume that there's a bright series director or VP of events out there right now who's like, I'm doing this. I'm going cross-channel and we're going hard. How do they make an argument? I mean, we've got your data, but for their personal performance metrics, what should they ask for in order to put this kind of system in place? Or is it something that needs to come top down? How is this going to work for those folks?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it has to come from both. Our CEO of our foundation, Mio Yamashita, she came from the corporate side, so it was kind of new to her. So I made sure I took my time to get her to understand our portfolio and what the value that was, that came to the foundation through the events. And so as I went through the numbers, and she's data driven, she comes from a consulting practice. I helped her understand the value, and then she said, "Steve, why don't we put this in front of the board?" And so I did a presentation showing some of the data that we're kind of touching on today to show that hidden value of events to the entire portfolio. Because if the board just sees a P&L on our Ride to Conquer Cancer, well, okay, 62% return to charity, not bad. And we raised 17 or $18 million, not bad. But, come on, you can do better. And I'm like, well, hold on a second here. Let's actually look at how many new donors we acquired. And oh, yeah, by the way, a third of our board members are event participants first, right? So when you get them to understand the hidden value, that really helps people understand and then help support you. So there's definitely the top-down approach that is helpful to any organization.
Yeah.
And then the first part of your question was what, around sort of
that Canadians are just nicer. None of this matters.
Yeah, well, that's kind of true, but there's a lot of great people out there all across North America.
Thank you, Steve. So I'm curious. Okay, so there are organizations here, and they don't have a big analytics department, and they don't have a budget to go hire a consultant. Is there a quick and dirty set of comparisons they can do to help them make this argument?
Well, you can take this presentation and show it to your board or your CEO or your VP of finance, and you hope that they'll be inspired to, so, I mean, that's the first step. I mean, there's probably some really even basic analytics. Like if anyone has a major gifts department, or you could look at how often a participant comes back year after year, and you can probably do some basic math to understand that these people are supporting you in different ways over a long period of time. And that's what you really have to get into, to convince, people that, the value of events are far beyond just that 1 year P&L. I did a version of this presentation at Peer-to-Peer last year, and I had a few people reach out to me from, between Fred Hutch and Roswell and down in Georgia, and they wanted to pick my brain. I'm happy to help as well. And I know your team, Katrina, are experts in this field as well. So I think there's resources out there to help people back up their case, for the importance of events.
Yeah. So one of the things that you have said time and time again with me is that this is a long game. So how long is it?
Yeah. So we, again, doing the math, this is all analytics that we have from our data for many, many years. It's on average, it takes 9 years to convert an event participant to a major gift donor. And as I said before, we've had, I think 98 major gifts that have come in through the front porch of the events portfolio. But it takes time, right? It takes time to convert these people, to inspire them, to have them drink the Kool-Aid, or to help educate them to what we're all about. A lot of people, they may not know about the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation and the Princess Margaret Cancer Center, but they come in, they do an event, we introduce them to the doctors and the researchers, we show them the impact we've had in the cancer space, and then it might take them a few more years, and then we enter a conversation for, stepping up their involvement, and on average 9 years is what it takes. So it does take some time to reap the rewards of that front porch, which is the events.
Right. So since you've made your own mental transformation, where you used to be protecting your silo and now you've thrown the doors open, come on in, I'd love to get into yours. Since you've made this transition and you've come to understand particularly the connection with major gifts, what different things are you doing specifically to make this not 9 years, but 7 years, or to make, the pipeline greater flowing into the other revenue channels?
So we're making sure that, in fact, before all of our events, as an example, we have regular meetings with our colleagues in our development department and show them who's coming to these events, so that maybe they have an opportunity to develop, to create relationships with these people.
Right.
We have different ways of sort of analyzing. I mean, if you look at the leaderboard, you're going to probably understand who are the people who have major capacity, but that's not always the case. We have people hiding down at the bottom of our fundraising leaderboards who have massive capacity. So it's in our best interest to kind of study and analyze who's showing up to our events, and then trying to inspire them to either come back or maybe migrate over to other areas. And having the CEO front and center, having all of our senior leadership team at a lot of our events, so that we can connect with people, thank them, and inspire them to continue to support us. And we hope that being a little bit more purposeful around our cross platform initiatives, that we can take this 9 years down to 8 or 7 years. And instead of 98 major gifts coming from events in the last 15 years, can we make that 200 or 300? Because I think that they want to give, they want to support, but it's making sure that they're aware and inspiring them appropriately. Right.
Yep. I love it. Okay. I have this many more questions, not to scare you, but I also would like to give the audience an opportunity to both tell us where they're from, where they're listening from. I would love to know, what about this made you show up? Because I have a feeling there's a lot of pain out there in terms of making the argument for events. 4 or 5 years ago, there was a whole raft of consultants who went through the industry, and they charged a bunch of money to do really simple math, saying the ROI on 2/3 of your events is not good enough to keep them, cut them. Steve, what do you think the impact of having done that would have been on an organization?
Well, I mean, I am a events guy around here. I think you mentioned my fancy title, but I'm really chief events guy. And I'm all in on events. We do try to hold our events to a high standard of return to charity. And we also measure our events with an NPS score, so a net promoter score, to ensure that our participants are having just a wonderful time, so that they'll come back year after year. So me personally, I'm not afraid to spend a little money to do the marketing and to create a great experience to bring people back, because acquiring new donors through other channels is so expensive. And when you're acquiring those donors, it's usually for a one-off. It's a transaction. You're not creating community. And so, I'm a big believer in looking at the long game. And so when you have an event that maybe isn't performing at the level of your best events, making sure you give it a fair chance. Too often we rush to shut something down or sunset something when you're not truly understanding all the lifetime value that's accruing from an event like that. So make sure you give it enough chance to grow and flourish and be a part of your ecosystem, if you have such an ecosystem within your organization.
I love it. I see Katie and Tanya are here. I'm curious, and others too, please feel free to jump in. How do you see this conversation going inside your house? Does your C-suite leadership understand these dynamics? Do they believe these dynamics, or do they have a scarcity mentality and operating from an annual revenue perspective only? And we'd love to hear. Chelsea, hi, Chelsea. I would love to hear if you have any thoughts or experience on measuring the value of events in terms of crossover volunteers to mission support and activation. So that's a version of the question I asked earlier. And maybe, Steve, the question is, in your analysis, did you see that kind of migration, or did you track it?
We didn't know. I don't, we're primarily a fundraising organization, and then we grant the money over to the cancer center.
Hospital, yeah.
We have a lot of volunteers, so we have our event participants who are volunteers, but then we have, another 1,000 people who just come out on an event weekend, and they hand out, snacks at the pit stops at our events or things like that. There's a long list of people who want to actually volunteer inside our cancer center, which is we're probably set for years, as my guess, in terms of the volunteer lineup, because everyone wants to come in and support sadly, the number of people who are being diagnosed with cancer. And we treat I think 17 or 18,000 new patients every year here. We have a great medical team and a great volunteer team that support them. But
yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. I'm curious. Many of my clients really have trouble measuring lifetime value, and using it as a metric over the long term is fraught because of, platform changes, because of data governance changes, because of all the duct tape and the WD-40 on the
Yeah.
CRM. You're in the enviable position of being able to do that.
We are, yeah. So we're lucky that we have both people in-house. We've used external consultants also. Katrina, even your team, looked at some of the data that we, gave them in our project together. So, as I said, we're lucky. We're in a fortunate position to be one of the leading foundations in the country here. So we had those resources. But like I said before, I think you can do a budget version of what we're doing. If you have some people who are good with numbers, like there's some young math wizards that we've brought in, from University of Toronto, who can take our data and slice it 6 ways from Sunday and come up with some really interesting stats. And,
Yeah.
So there's probably some cheap and cheery ways to solve for these issues for the smaller organizations out there.
I would agree. One of my most favorite hires we made at Turnkey, we were doing a lot of analytics in-house, and we found a kid who specialized in small particle physics at Virginia Tech, and he could do exactly as you say.
Right.
Any way you needed it done, Ryan could do it. It was great.
Yeah.
So we have Katie. I just was going to share her comment with you. She said, we're struggling with this conversation, and being asked to make event cuts that will water down the resources needed to make our events as robust. This is helpful and inspiring to keep fighting the good fight. So in a situation like that, where, it sounds like decisions have already been made to cut events, if you had a minute with your CEO and you had to make the argument, exactly what would you say? The elevator ride is only going to last for a minute, Steve. What do you say?
Well, I mean, it's actually, I don't know if do we still have that one last slide, Katrina?
We do.
Because I think that's a good segue. So here's my elevator speech. So, what do the following have in common? So this is a skill testing question. And I can't see any chat or if people are commenting on this, but none of these things are measured on a P&L.
Yeah.
So and everything that gets measured here is what is truly the priority. So we talked about creating the sense of community. You're acquiring, we've just justified a new event. It's top secret. I can't tell you, Katrina. We just justified investing in a new event purely as an acquisition program to a community that we're not touching right now. So you're acquiring people way less expensively than a traditional way of acquiring new donors. The lifetime value, which I've talked about, the lifetime value is so massive for our event supporters. We connect with the corporate community in such an extensive way through our events, whether they're event sponsors, employee engagement, they're participating, they're getting VIP tents at our events, they're bringing their customers, they're bringing their suppliers, they're bringing senior leadership team out to support these kind of programs. The media value that is generated through our events is second to none. If you had to spend the amount of money that we get in earned value, you'd be impossible. As I said before, more than a third of our board are people who started in events and then they migrated through the board. The major gifts I talked about, like literally millions of dollars, and Katrina, you and I have talked about before, is that we should actually take our marketing budget and put it into major gifts, because we're attracting, I know, hopefully none of my major gifts friends are listening right now, but we're going through budgeting right now. I'm going to put all my acquisition costs over to their budget. So we should have zero there. And then the last thing, which is kind of tied back to community. So this is one of our riders who participated for over 10 years. He got a tattoo of our logo on the back of his calf in honor of his mom. How many brands out there have people getting their logo tattooed on their supporters, right? Talk about community, talk about passion, talk about mission motivated. You can't buy that. That doesn't get measured in a P&L. And all these things do not get measured in a P&L, but yet they have a massive impact on the future P&L of an organization.
I think there's, and actually Tanya said that they had someone at JDRF when she was there who did that, got a tattoo. But I agree with you. I think it's true. You can't measure these things yet. I do believe like what you're showing us today is the path to being able to measure these things with predictive analytics that will say like, if you broke even on peer-to-peer and doubled your investment in it and broke even, what would happen? And what you're showing us is that good things would happen. I wanted to share with you, we wrote and released a book in January, Social Fundraising, Mining the New Peer-to-Peer Landscape. And one of the people who popped out with the most amazing quote to support what you're saying was Natalie Carlisle, who was with Food for the Poor. And what she said in her beautiful Southern accent is that, Katrina, these major gift donors would show up in the major gift pipeline and they would come in all bright and shiny and fresh with not a bit of expense attached to them. And we all knew it was wrong, but we still accounted for it that way. She was just brilliant. And I was like, wow, that is a fact right there. Yeah. So Steve, to encapsulate it, you believe that the acquisition cost, so if 40% of a event participant's value shows up outside of your events, then we should move 40% of our acquisition cost out too. Wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. And so, yeah, so that I can't even remember if I cited that one yet. So we know that another great stat, which we actually should have had a slide on it. So 60% of the future. So we talk about all of our supporters who come in through events. Mm-hmm. And we know through our analytics that 60% of their future value stays within our event ecosystem. So they keep participating in our bike ride or our road hockey event or whatever. They migrate between events. But 40% of their future value accrues to either major gifts, or they buy lottery tickets, or they become an annual donor. And so 40%, that has in the past, so I know this in the past 20 years, that's, I think it's almost $500 million, including some pretty significant major gifts. And so, yeah, so I need to go back to my major gifts team and say, hey, 40% of my acquisition budget is going to go over to you. So you should be paying me to bring all these great people to our foundation. Yeah.
Or as we say in the States, where my money?
That's yeah.
All right. I just want to thank you. I will let the crowd know, and people are very active in the chat. And I want to thank you all for being here. Go Hokies. I see somebody from Virginia Tech there. Many strong peer-to-peer organizations are represented. We thank you for being here. Steve is incredibly generous. So if you have a question, hit me. I'll route it to him. If you have a need with your own social fundraising program, we'd love to help you. And I just think this is one of the most important conversations we can have. You know, Steve, you alluded to it earlier. We spend a boatload of money on marketing, and all of our marketing is break even or at a loss. It's at a loss. What am I saying? It's at a huge, it is like zero revenue. If it's revenue, it's moved to develop. Zero revenue. And yet we feel bad when we do marketing at break even. That's a strange world, you know?
It is. It boggles the mind, Katrina. And, you know, like we've had a couple instances where maybe our events were not trending as well as we like. And people are like, oh, maybe we need to trim the marketing budget. And I'm like, you know, for all those new people getting into this peer-to-peer fundraising, the last thing you cut is your marketing budget. In fact, double it.
Okay, and be clear, you're talking about marketing for your events.
Yeah, like yeah, absolutely. You need to increase your, like what I call, if you start cutting marketing, is you're going to get into a death spiral, because then how are people going to know about your organization? How are they going to join and fundraise on your behalf? They're not going to. So you need to increase marketing. You go the other way if your event's trending down, and do your best to and you know, we did that through the pandemic, and you know, maybe we spent a little bit more than we should have in a time that we knew we weren't going to get the revenue. But what we did was we increased market share during the pandemic, and now we're seeing the fruits of that. And you know, all five of our peer-to-peer fundraising programs since we reemerged from the pandemic have increased year over year. And in fact, we added a new event to our $1 Million Clubs. We have 5 events in the $1 Million Club plus. So yeah, like you got to take these bold decisions and work with your board and your CEO to help facilitate these growth opportunities for your organization.
I love it. Steve, thank you so much. You have been incredibly generous with your time, with your talent, and with sharing this data with us, because it's really not out there in a big way. Everyone who is here, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do so. Drop us a review if you're able, and we will be back again with another smart person like Steve very soon. Everyone, thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Have a great one.
All right. You too, Katrina. That was awesome. Yeah.
Thanks. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.